While Donald Trump was busy posting on Truth Social about turning Canada into the 51st state and threatening Prime Minister Mark Carney with economic destruction, a quiet and decisive shift was unfolding in Brussels, one that Washington didn't see coming. On January 2nd, 2026, four of America's closest allies, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand, formally submitted applications to join the European Union's Safe Defense Program, the same exclusive security initiative that admitted Canada just 6 weeks earlier. According to leaked documents from the European Commission obtained by CNN, all four applications are expected to receive approval by March 15th, 2026. This isn't just a diplomatic gesture or a trade negotiation. It is the construction of a post-American security architecture, a framework that could redefine global power dynamics for decades to come. Pentagon officials have reportedly described the situation using words like catastrophic and irreversible in classified memos. When Canada joined SAFE in December 2025, most analysts in Washington treated it as an isolated incident. A frustrated neighbor, they said, seeking alternatives after years of Trump's threats and tariffs. But leaked documents from the European External Action Service tell a different story. European defense ministers have quietly been constructing a plan called the Framework for Allied Non-EU Partners since August 2025. The goal? Create a permanent institutional structure that allows trusted democracies outside Europe to participate directly in European defense programs, bypassing U.S. dominated procurement and alliance structures entirely. Canada wasn't an exception. It was the proof of concept. And now that the model has succeeded, four more countries are stepping in, signaling a tectonic shift in global security. SAFE currently manages roughly €150 billion in defense financing across 27 EU member states. Internal EU budget projections suggest that if Australia, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand are admitted, total financing could expand to €340 billion by 2030. This would cover joint defense contracts, production partnerships, and technology sharing agreements from which U.S. defense companies could be largely excluded. For comparison, U.S. defense exports to these five countries totaled $48 billion in 2024 alone. This isn't a minor redirection of contracts, it is a systemic replacement of reliance on American defense systems with a European alternative. The specifics of each country's proposal show why this is such a strategic game changer. Australia committed $34 billion over the next decade to European defense manufacturing, including joint production facilities for missiles, drones, and naval technologies. Australia's unique expertise in rare earth minerals and advanced materials is a key contribution. Japan offered $52 billion USD over 12 years to establish 3 dedicated production centers in Poland, Romania, and Finland, focusing on precision electronics, semiconductors for weapon systems, and autonomous vehicles. Japanese firms would take minority stakes in European companies to facilitate technology transfer in both directions. South Korea proposed constructing an entire artillery production complex in Eastern Europe, capable of manufacturing 500,000 shells annually. 60% of output would be reserved for EU member states, with 40% available for export to SAFE participants. Investment is estimated at $18 billion, with production starting in late 2027. New Zealand. While smaller economically, New Zealand offers access to Five Eyes intelligence sharing networks, effectively creating a bridge between European security services and the Five Eyes alliance without U.S. approval. This represents an unprecedented level of integration and intelligence cooperation. Legally, this is possible under Article 12, Paragraph 3 of SAFE's founding treaty, March 2024, which allows non-EU participation if the applicant demonstrates democratic governance, commitment to European security objectives, and adherence to EU defense procurement standards. Canada met these criteria. Now, 4 more countries are arguing they qualify as well. For 75 years, U.S. foreign policy rested on one structural advantage. Allies depended on America for protection. NATO, U.S., Japan security treaties, and troop deployments in South Korea and the Pacific all relied on this assumption. This dependence created leverage. If Japan needed nuclear deterrence, it accepted U.S. bases on its soil. If Australia required Pacific security, it followed U.S. strategic decisions. South Korea relied on the U.S. military presence to counter North Korean threats. Now, that leverage is eroding. Allies are gaining real alternatives, and the consequences extend far beyond defense contracts. They reshape the entire balance of global influence. Leaked Pentagon assessments warned as early as 2023 that continued unpredictability in U.S. foreign policy would drive allies toward European cooperation. SAFE was identified as a potential parallel defense ecosystem, reducing U.S. weapons demand by up to 40% over 20 years. That warning went unheeded, and today, it is becoming reality. If all 5 countries shift just 30% of their procurement to SAFE, U.S. defense contractors including Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop, Grumman, Raytheon, and General Dynamics stand to lose roughly $290 billion in revenue between 2026 and 2040. These companies built their business models on allied dependency, and now that assumption is collapsing. This is more than a financial blow. It represents a fundamental shift in global defense dynamics, where Europe, not the U.S., is becoming the hub for allied procurement, production, and strategic collaboration. For decades, U.S. leverage over allies influenced everything from trade negotiations to United Nations voting patterns. Allies negotiated from positions of weakness because they had no security alternatives. SAFE changes that entirely. Diplomatic cables from Germany and France describe SAFE's expansion as creating strategic autonomy for democracies and laying the foundation for a post-Atlantic security order. These are operational plans, backed by hundreds of billions in funding and legal frameworks, not theoretical discussions. In practical terms, Japan can now negotiate with Washington without being forced into unfavorable agreements. South Korea gains independence from U.S. driven defense constraints. Australia and New Zealand can secure Pacific stability without relying solely on U.S. military power. Canada strengthens its defense and industrial partnerships outside of North American dependence. According to European Commission timelines, the 15th of March 2026, formal approval vote for the 4 applications. Preliminary reviews indicate approval is highly likely. June 2026, first joint production contracts under the expanded SAFE program. Early 2027, initial production facilities operational in Europe, with direct integration of allied expertise and resources. Meanwhile, Washington's response has been minimal. Sources indicate Trump dismissed the matter as European nonsense. Pentagon officials, however, warn that this strategic realignment has generational consequences. Reversing it would require long-term consistency and diplomatic credibility, both of which have been eroded in recent years. Europe, conversely, is moving decisively. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is expected to announce SAFE's budget expansion to €340 billion on the 20th of January 2026, the day of Trump's inauguration, a symbolic gesture signaling Europe's readiness to lead a post-American security order. This shift is not ideological. Allies aren't joining SAFE because they oppose the U.S. They are joining because American leadership became unreliable. Polls conducted by the European Council on Foreign Relations in November 2025 reveal that 68% of Allied defense officials no longer trust the U.S. to honor security commitments beyond 2028, up from 34% in 2020. Trump's policies and rhetoric directly contributed to this erosion of confidence. The result? Allies are moving toward a fully funded, reliable alternative in Europe, one that doesn't come with threats, tariffs, or policy volatility. By early 2027, SAFE could integrate 5 of America's closest allies into a European-centered security framework, complete with production facilities on European soil supported by allied investments, access to critical technology and rare materials, intelligence sharing bridging Five Eyes and European systems, financial commitments totaling hundreds of billions of euros. The broader consequence, the U.S. may lose its position as the primary security provider in the Indo-Pacific by 2035 if no corrective actions are taken. This represents a once-in-a-generation realignment of global military and strategic power. For the first time in 75 years, America's closest allies have the financial resources, industrial capacity, and political will to defend themselves without the USS. The real question is whether Washington will recognize what has been lost and take the steps necessary to restore trust and consistency, or whether this marks the beginning of a new era where Europe, not America, sets the security agenda for democracies worldwide. Safe isn't a threat. It's a strategic inevitability, a blueprint for a post-American world where allies are no longer dependent on U.S. protection. The clock is ticking,